Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with divine rules and commands us to occupy ourselves with the words of Torah. So, as you, I'm sure, know, especially as folks who I'm guessing participated in at least one Seder, this story has really always captured the human imagination, of course, the Jewish imagination, perhaps first and foremost. But, in this moment in time, we can really see that imagination expanding through our media, right? There are amazing films. There's the Ten Commandments. There's one of my personal favorites, a Rugrats Passover. Perhaps you've seen, or your kids or family have seen. And The Prince of Egypt, of course, I think now is sort of the gold standard of Passover films. This is not going to be about that, but it is important to note. You may actually notice some things from any one of these stories in the stories that we look at today. But this is sort of to illustrate that this is a big part of our tradition, that this story has always fascinated us. We've tried to understand, what does it mean, for us? What does it mean literally? And what happened? What are the events? What are the details? Perhaps it happened in real life, in actuality, as it's written, perhaps not. But in any case, we want to know what's it all about, And so today we do that frequently in films or even theater. But in ancient times, curiosity and imagination was really expressed through midrash. Midrash is a rabbinic genre. There really are two different genres of midrash. There's the Aggadic midrash and the halachic midrash. We're going to be focusing on Aggadic midrash today. Agadah kind of means legend. So there's a lot of stories involved and trying to piece through it and sort of being very creative and trying to come up with, different details that will help color parts of the story. However, it's important to note that in Aggadic midrash, halacha, of course, does come up, and in halachic midrash, which is designed really sort of to think through the commandments and the rules, are not designed, it just kind of happened, but that's how we experience it frequently, also does, of course, include a fair amount of agadah, of legend, which also colors that. So it's not a perfect division, but today we're going to be looking at Aggadic midrash. But first, I want us to talk through briefly the Cliff Notes version of the Israelite story in Egypt. Penina, do you have a question already?
To add? I can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I thought that the word Agadah with an Aleph, it means something that not necessarily happened. It's a story that people develop that tell for each other. And when you're talking about Beshalach, about the actual word, it means that a messenger, a shaliach, is somebody who has a certain message. So I think you can sum up the whole story of the Exodus as it's supposed to give a message, not just for the people who crossed, but for the people later on, right? Because we started it, and what really happened there. Agadah with an Aleph, you have to be very careful. It means something that not necessarily happened. It's like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. You can say this is an Agadah with an Aleph. Yeah, but when you're talking about the Passover, Haggadah, that means that there was something there that was said to give you a message.
But today we're talking about Agadah with an Aleph.
Okay, so that's something that it's the whole. This is something that's good for the movies with all the special effect and stuff.
So it's good for the movies, but it's also good for us to think through, and also these do inform. You'll see it does inform. Look, like when we get through it, if we get all the way down, I have 13 sort of specific excerpts from Rabbi Eliezer. When we get to the bottom, you will find real Jewish belief represented in these Aggadic stories.
That's good.
Before we get through it, thank you. I appreciate the clarification. But before we get going there, I want us to really talk through just briefly, like what happened step by step in the Exodus story. So I'm gonna do that. If anyone is like, you missed something really big, let me know. But let's just start. There's this guy named Jacob. He has 12 sons, one daughter. He favors one over the others. Name is Joseph. Joseph's brothers don't like it. They put him in a pit. Judah, fortunately, or is it Reuben? They intervene, not to kill him, and he is sold off into slavery in Egypt. Joseph spends about 13 years in Egypt doing various things before he comes into power by interpreting the dreams of the Pharaoh. Based on Joseph's coming into power and some just happenstance of a famine in the land of Canaan where he came from, Joseph's brothers come down. There's a little bit of subterfuge, some family drama. This happens, that happens, and eventually all of Jacob and his kids and their families come down to Egypt, where they sojourn for about 400 years or so, we hear. During this time, the Hebrews, or the Israelites, these children of Jacob and their children and children's children, grow to become a large nation. They do very well for themselves. And eventually, a new Pharaoh arises over Egypt. This is like the first line in the book of Shemot, or the second verse, right? Came over the Egypt, and he did not know Joseph. He didn't remember the whole thing. And instead, he saw a huge nation of foreigners inside of his land, and he found them to be potentially threatening, that perhaps if there was a war, the Hebrews or the Israelites would join their enemies and go against them. And so he decides to start winnowing down the population by targeting the male firstborns. But there are these two midwives, Shifra and Pua, who say no, but then they change the rules again. And now these boys are being cast into the river. And eventually, Moses is born. Moses goes into a basket of reeds. Moses is discovered by one of Pharaoh's daughters, one of the princesses of Egypt. He's raised in the house of the Pharaoh. He discovers that there's some injustice going on. He kills a man. He flees. He goes into the desert. He gets married. He has formed a close relationship with his father-in-law. He has an incredible experience in the cave with the bush. He meets God. He goes back to Egypt. He and his brother and his sister lead the people out of Egypt, but only after Pharaoh's heart is hardened both by himself and by God on a number of occasions, which allow a number of plagues to happen, which God may or may not need to happen for the purpose of showing all these different signs and wonders. I apologize. I just realized I was really ramping up and going very quickly. But this is eventually Pharaoh changes his heart, kind of, and decides to let the people go. But halfway through that experience, of course, Pharaoh changes his mind again, sends armies after. It's okay. The Red Sea parts, the people go to freedom, the Egyptians follow them. Splash, crash, they are drowned in the sea, and the people begin their 40-year sojourn in the desert. That is, in a nutshell, the story of the Israelites in Egypt and after. You know this story. So now let's see, what don't we know about this story? What's going to be new? So we're looking again at this collection of Aggadic Midrash called Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. Traditionally, this is attributed to Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, a second century rabbi. However, scholars think this is probably more an 8th century work, the Gaonic period. This is like the geniuses, rabbis, folks who, like if you've ever heard of Saadia HaGaon, people who were really part of the sort of codification of the Talmud, not the writers of, but the people who redacted and sort of said it, and who set early liturgy and what our prayer might look like. These are really influential individuals. So some believe that this is a truly ancient text. Some believe this is really almost into the beginning of the Middle Ages. And it was likely, in any case, written either in or around the land of Israel. Today, we're going to look at a few excerpts from this text. And I want us, as doing so, this is going to be a Torah study where I don't necessarily have a big lesson at the end or a huge, we're going to tie it all together, because I want us to think, and I'll rely on you all, of course, to help read some of these excerpts, but I also want your answers. And, we're going to think through things together. We're going to think about the rabbinic imagination today. What were they trying to answer? What are the questions? Sometimes literally, like what are the questions that they're trying to answer that they have about the text? But also, what are their anxieties? What do we know about their lives by what they're thinking about? what might we be able to figure out? And of course, there's a whole other host of questions that we can go through, but we can also think about it personally, trying to think about what is the lesson that's in this. If we know Pesach, and of course, Parshat Beshalach is about that messenger and about spreading the story and teaching us something, not just in the generation that experienced it, but infinitely down the generations. Of course, we read in the Haggadah that in each generation, it's our responsibility to feel as if we ourselves are freed from Egypt, right? So what does this teach us, and what does this way? But also, because some of these texts might seem strange to us, I'm also curious, what does seem strange, and how do they inform our ever-evolving understanding of Judaism and Jewish thought? So that's what we're going to do over the next 45 minutes or so. And I'm curious if there's a volunteer to read our first excerpt from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. This is chapter 48, where he begins to think about the details of the Egyptian bondage. Go ahead, Rebecca.
The Egyptian bondage. Rabban Yochanan, son of Zakkai, opened his exposition with the text. In that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed will I give this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. From Genesis. Abram said before the Holy One, blessed be he, sovereign of all the universe. Thou hast not given me seed, yet dost thou say, unto thy seed I will give this land. He said, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, Abram, the entire world stands by my word, and thou dost not believe in my word, but thou sayest, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? By thy life. In two ways shalt thou surely know, as it is said. And he said to Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in the land which is not theirs, and they shall afflict them.
Before we continue, thank you, Rebecca. Before we continue to see how they start to develop this is something that we might consider sort of a petichta in Midrash. It's the opening part of a thought, really, and of a section. And so Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer really includes its Genesis through part of Numbers that is commented on here. But so something that we're going to notice, which is also just like a good lesson on how Midrash operates, is that usually we'll begin with a verse, but we're going to use other verse, just like we see when we look at Talmud and even sometimes in Mishnah, right? We're looking at how these other verses are going to be used to teach us something or to explain another part of the text. So here we see this line in Genesis 15, verse 18, which the rabbis, allegedly Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, was able to parse into different parts to say, okay, this section about being a stranger in the land is sign one, that it's been fulfilled, and that those people will be afflicted, or that someone else will afflict them, is sign number 2. Any questions or thoughts before we move to the next sort of question? Penina.
I don't have a question. I just saw here something amazing. When they are talking back about Abraham and the promise to Abraham and with the relation to the exodus of Egypt, it's unbelievable fits. It's not just a Talmudic saying. It fits exactly what happened. What was promised to Abraham was fulfilled by this particular mission that Moses took over. And when they get back, we know that not all the tribes ever left, because they were supposed to raise their flags, and each flag represented a tribe that they would join, that they belonged to. And the strangers that came with them literally kind of like were divided among those tribes also. So they grew also in numbers because of by choice, which is a big thing, to see that people actually chose to join them and chose to make decisions to settle in that land together with the people of Israel. That tells you such an amazing history that actually you can stand up in the middle of any park and literally declare what was always there, and the world kind of like camouflage it over and over again today. The right to that particular piece of land, and it's amazing. And this I never read this explanation, but this is the choice of sentences and how he presented it. It's amazing. Another thing is they are specifically saying that two rivers met at the Nile there where Moses was found. And according to the Amunah Elis, that ancient belief that out of this particular union, a savior will arise, or another God will come. I'm sorry, this is the gardeners. I took it. Well, anyhow.
I want to get to Susan, but I'll give a brief explanation. The Enuma Elish is the sort of the Babylonian creation text, and so it's fascinating when also
God is going to come out of that, and it's mentioned in here that they actually the two rivers combined there, matched there, and this is where Moses was found. So it's unbelievable how they follow old religions to literally not by our point of view to justify what happened, and they're also emphasizing that other religions believe that here it is, that the Savior was found and he's going to lead them into freedom. This is amazing.
Yes.
This is amazing.
Well, there's even more to come. Susan, I see your hand.
Yes, I got lost in that. Totally lost. Are we going back to what we're analyzing here on this script? And what was your question? I lost it.
So my question isn't necessarily one that is specific, but this is sort of, we need this section to get into the rest of the questions that are happening. But what's interesting here is that there's a sort of, if we think about, right? So like if my question really is, what do you think the rabbi's question is, right? What are they trying to understand here?
Well, okay, good. We're back to the basics. So it's the assignment of the land, one of the things, and a prediction of the future of what would happen. And I guess with this, they're saying, look at God knew that they were going to be in bondage for a while. And then also, I mean, it's still used that God gave us this land, gave the Jewish people this land. So does that deal with this? Also, I thought, when does he name Abraham? I thought that went along with the promise.
That's a great question. Your second question, I don't have the verse exactly, but there are a couple of different covenants that are made with Abraham. So this is the early covenant, and then I believe he becomes Abraham at the later covenant. And this is before Isaac is born, of course. So, and also the rabbis are thinking, right, like if we're going to be discussing the Egyptian bondage and the Exodus from Egypt, are we sure, by the way, that this story is actually the fulfillment of the earlier prophecy? So this is them really like framing that and trying to establish, like, yes, it is, in fact. Rebecca.
It's a huge amount of land, the Egyptian river to the Euphrates. So I'm wondering if the point of the rabbis is to say that you not only will your seed multiply, but you're going to have a huge swath of land. And maybe that contributed to some of the warring in the land.
Yeah, I think
because the expectation was going to be that there's all this land that's designated for the Israelites.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think we understand that it's a very short period of time that land, if all of it ever, was in the kingdom of Israel. I don't actually think that, but I will say, I don't think that this part, and this is, of course, my interpretation, is really actually emphasizing the land. And you'll see as we go forward that this is really just a framing, right? To make sure that we can say that this is the fulfillment of that prophecy, because of course, on the other end of all of this affliction is going to be that journey and entrance into the land. So I want to move us forward, just because this is really this is like a necessary part in order to understand what comes next. But now they're going to get into something more specific. And my question to frame this next couple of excerpts is, why? What's the point of doing the numbers game that they do? So let's get into it. Do I have a volunteer to read here?
Well, I will.
Okay, thanks.
Rabbi Elazar, son of Azariah, said, "Is it not so that Israelites did not dwell in Egypt for 210 years? But in order to teach thee, know that this is so. Come and see. For when Joseph went down to Egypt, he was 17 years old, and when he stood before Pharaoh, he was 30 years old, as it is said. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine, and behold, they are 9 and 30 years in all. And Levi, the son of Jacob, was 6 years older than Joseph. And when he went down to Egypt, I was trying to calculate all this. He must have had a calculator. And when he went down to Egypt, he was 45 years old. And the years of his life in Egypt were 92 years. Behold, all of them amount to 137 years, as it is said. And the years of life of Levi were 137 years. And he was going down to Egypt, his wife bare unto him Jochebed, his daughter, as it is said, and the name of Abraham's wife was Jochebed. And she was 130 years old when she bare Moses, as it said. And Moses was 40 years old when he stood before Pharaoh. Behold, the total is 210 years in all. And thus it says, and they shall serve them, and they shall afflict them for 400 years.
So did anybody do that math? I'm going to be so honest. I didn't do the math. I trust the rabbis. I shouldn't, because if they're anything like me, they're not good at math. But in any case, I did trust them. But at the very end of this, right, we have this, there's a conflict. We just did all that math. And then they shall afflict them for 400 years. But we just counted 210 years. So we won't comment on this yet. We'll just continue, because there's more math things to think about. Any volunteer to try to understand this part, to help us? I could also do it. Happy to.
Meryl's
Okay.
gonna do it. Meryl,
perfect. I didn't see your hand. Excellent. Go ahead.
Rabbi Elazar, son of Araka, said to them, "The Holy One, blessed be he, and this to Abraham only at the hour when he had seed, as it is said, the seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not theirs. From the time when Isaac was born until Israel went forth from Egypt, 400 years elapsed. Rabban Yochanan, son of Zakkai, said to him, Verily, verily, it is written, now the sojourning of our children of Israel, which they sojourned in Egypt, was 430 years. He answered them, saying, 210 years Israel abode in Egypt, and 5 years before Jacob came to Egypt, there were born unto Joseph the fathers of 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, and they belonged to the Israelites. Behold, we have 215 years of days and nights. This equals 430 years. The Holy One, blessed be he, reduced the time for the sake of the merit of the patriarchs, for they are the mountains of the world, and for the sake of the merit of the mothers, for they are the hills of the world. And concerning them, the sculptor said, the voice of my beloved, behold, he cometh leaping upon mountains, skipping over the hills.
Okay, so that's the end of our first excerpt. Anyone? I think we've already kind of expressed it. Does anyone know what's the question that the rabbis are trying to answer here?
I'm not sure, but they're trying to deal with the time frame of 400 years. How are they going to justify that with the calculator? And both of them seem to have, I didn't add any of those up, but that's what they seem to be doing because they're telling how long this one was and how long they stayed. And it almost seems like they're adding laterally a Manasseh and Ephraim. They had 215 years and days and light, but then that one's from Manasseh and one's from Ephraim, and they add to 400. I don't know. It seems like twisting into a pretzel.
So they're really just dealing with it. There's a problem. The Torah is written; it's the word of God, and there aren't mistakes. But this doesn't add up because here in Genesis it says 400 years. And here in Exodus, it says 430 years. But if we do the math ourselves, it's not those numbers. So how do we get to 400 or 430 years? And so they get really creative. They find other verses. Maybe this one from it says that's canticles, but Shir Hashirim. I love the word canticles, but it doesn't. It's Shir Hashirim. They pull this out. I'm actually not 100% sure how this functions, except for the idea that they're using this to associate the mothers with the hills. But yeah, there's an issue. So this is, I think, my favorite is really creative, is that the days and nights constitute their own years. But also this should, if you ever encounter, and I wouldn't suggest, getting into any arguments, but should you ever encounter like a diehard creationist who really is just like the earth is 5,785 years old, you could say, well, maybe are you counting the days and the nights separately? Like, are you counting, these little time, right? Like we have to assume that time as represented in tradition is not literal time. Both in terms of the years and the ages of people, but in terms of 7 days of creation are not 7 days of 23-hour and 56-minute periods or whatever it is. Yeah, Penina, go ahead.
I am convinced that because of where this rabbi lived and what happened with in his generation to the Jewish community around him, where was he and what was going on around them when they came up with all these questions that are, I call them if questions, and I don't like if questions. The thing is that I'm going to show you one example. I was teaching at the Silver Temple. And at the time that I was teaching, Rabbi Hillel Silver was still alive, the one who did the speech to the UN for the benefit of the State of Israel. He was roaming the halls over there. And he also was been ordinate. He was in every time that there was a president in the United States, he was there, a representative of the Jewish community to do the blessing, blah, blah. What I'm trying to tell you, his son, that came after him, it was a very, very not orthodox, not conservative. It was a very reformed temple, Silver Temple. Now it belongs to some concert, to the Cleveland Symphony, I think. They bring concert over there. It's a magnificent building. But Daniel, he died of brain cancer eventually, later on. But he took the Siddur that they were using, and he took out the sentence next year in Jerusalem. I was furious. It was 10 years that I was there. And I told him that beside also that we were a lot of teachers from Israel there, and we have our own point of view of what's supposed to be done in the Siddur and what should be taken out. And some of us left. I was one of them. It bothered me very much that he took next year in Jerusalem out of the Siddur. So what I'm trying to tell you is...
אבל פנינה, זה לא כל כך חשוב, אני חייב להתקדם.
Yeah, it is, because the idea of living among other people and taking this vision of next year in Jerusalem, it's very much to what happens with the other rabbis in those places. They were in Babylonia. They even were left in Jerusalem up there in the north when the country was already under the empire, the Islam, thing, which was horrible life for the people who were left in Israel. But it depends who writes it and where is he and what's going on around them. That's all I can say.
Okay.
So let's see where is he come from. What was happening where he wrote these things?
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. We're moving. I'm in a hotel and the housekeeping was coming, but we don't need it. So I'm going to move forward now to excerpt number 2. Thank you, Panina. So this is a different direction now. So you'll see, by the way, if you're paying attention to our numbering system, that we're going directly from chapter 48, like chunk 3, to chapter 38 or 48, chunk 4. However, the Midrash does not always function in a linear sense. And so we are going to do this. So I did my best to try to separate where a new idea begins. Sometimes it's not fully clear, but so we've spent excerpt 1 thinking about, okay, let's frame it. Did this fulfill the prophecy? We're going to say yes, but it doesn't really work. So let's try and make it work. Now we're going to go somewhere really completely different, which I will read. And I want to tell you in advance, I did some research to try and find where else this connects, and I could not really find anything. So there's a lot of questions here, and there are questions for me too. Rabbi Eliezer said, during all those years when the Israelites abode in Egypt, they dwelt securely and peacefully at ease until Ganun, in Hebrew it's Yagnun, one of the grandchildren of Ephraim, came and said to them, the Holy One, blessed be God, has revealed God's self to me to lead you out of Egypt. The children of Ephraim, in the pride of their heart, for they were of the royal seed and mighty men in battle, took their wives and sons, and they went forth from Egypt. The Egyptians pursued after them and slew of them 200,000, all of them mighty men. As it is said, the children of Ephraim, being armed and carrying bows, turned back in the day of battle. From Psalms 78:9. Anyone else? Anyone ever heard of Ganun? Like pre-Moses? I'm not sure. I included this because this is fascinating to me. It's something that I am planning to try to investigate a little bit more. But this is interesting. The word Ganun can be like guarded or covered or hidden even. It just depends, like if we're using biblical Hebrew or Aramaisms or things, but in the end it just like it's an interesting story, and it's one where you might wonder if the rabbis read this verse in Psalms and thought to themselves, wait a minute, because we have to remember these individuals really had the whole canon in their heads. They were able to recall any of it. They're thinking, well, let me like read through this little book in my head. Where do the children of Ephraim, where do they get their battle? Where, like, I don't remember this happening. It's referenced in the Psalms, but I don't remember it elsewhere. And so this is to give a direct reference point for that psalm. But I think we'll move on now to excerpt 3. This one I just came across when I was thrown. I was like, who's Ganun? Like, what? Okay. Now we're back to a little bit of a timing issue, but we're going to start thinking about the main character of the Passover story, other than God, Moses. I have a volunteer to read Rabbi Yanai.
I can read, Rabbi.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Rabbi Yanai said, the Egyptians did not enslave the Israelites, but for 1 hour of the day of the Holy One, blessed be he, that is to say, for 83 1/3 years. Whilst yet Moses was not born, the magicians said to Pharaoh, in the future a child will be born, and he will take Israel out of Egypt. Pharaoh thought and said, cast ye all the male children into the river, and he will be thrown in with them, and thereby the word of the magicians will be frustrated. Therefore, they cast all the male children into the river.
So this now, if you've ever read the first, chapters of Exodus and thought to yourself, okay, I get what's happening, but I don't understand why. I've been given no character development. Like, there's nothing that tells me what's going on with Pharaoh. Like, why does he feel this way? Where are these people? Like, this is sort of filling in some of that subtext. If you think about the way that if you ever wondered, what's his motivation? Other than just this general fear of that perhaps they would join the other people. We're bringing it, I guess, back to the Hollywood, even though we're going all the way ancient, right? Like, what's his motivation? This is maybe giving us a little background of perhaps what might have happened if that would compel Pharaoh to take the specific steps that Pharaoh took in order to try to frustrate the expansion and growth of the Israelite people. So in one sense, Pharaoh was perhaps warned, or not even in a sense, but in this story, Pharaoh's warned, right? That somebody is coming to ruin things. Continuing forward, 3 years elapsed until the birth of Moses. When Moses was born, these are the magicians again, said to Pharaoh, "Behold, he is born, and he is hidden from our vision." Pharaoh said to them, "Since he is born, henceforth ye shall not cast the male children into the river. Put upon them a hard yoke to embitter the years of their lives with hard labor," as said, and they made their lives bitter. Moving forward, unless there's stop me if you need, but I think we'll keep going through this excerpt. Rabbi Nathanael said, "The parents of Moses saw the child, for his form was like that of an angel of God. They circumcised him on the 8th day, and they called his name Yekutiel." So this is fun. Moses, 2 names. Moses is the name he's given by Pharaoh's daughter, but this introduces a tradition that Moses was also Yekutiel. Rabbi Shimon said, "They called him Tov, good. And as it is said, and when she saw him, that he was good." That's literally taking from the verse and ascribing that to his naming. "They concealed him in a house of earth for 3 months. After 3 months, she put him in an ark of bulrushes, and she cast him upon the bank of the river. All things are revealed before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, Bitya, the daughter of Pharaoh, was smitten sorely with leprosy, and she was not able to bathe in hot water. And she came to bathe in the river, and she saw the crying child. She put forth her hand and took hold of him, and she was healed. She said, 'This child is righteous, and I will preserve his life. Whosoever preserves a life is as though he had kept alive the whole world. Therefore was she worthy to inherit the life in this world and the life in the world to come.'" I really like this story. All the households of Pharaoh's palace were helping to educate Moses, as it is said, "And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown up that he went out unto his brethren. Moses went into the camp of Israel and saw one of the taskmasters of Pharaoh smiting one of the sons of Kohath, the Levites, for they were his brethren, as it is said, and he saw an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren." Now, this is explaining how does he know it's his brethren, what type of brethren. Let's be specific. Moses is from the tribe of the Levites, and so this must mean that he literally saw one of his cousins, so to speak. He began to rebuke him with the sword of his lips, and he slew him and buried him in the midst of the camp, as it is said, and he smote the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The word hol, meaning sand, signifies here Israel only, as it is said, "Yet the number of children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea." So this to me is really fascinating. I don't know that there's a specific question that they're asking here, but they are making really sort of a beautiful allusion. It's a little bit heavy, maybe even violent, but the poetry here is I think, phenomenal, that we see this one Egyptian, and maybe really all the Egyptians, are buried in the sand. They are buried in Israel. That we grow, we become mighty, we go on, we continue, we outlast, and the Egyptians fall underneath, which is really just a sort of a gorgeous way to think about and connect these verses. One from Hosea, which is really actually sort of like a phenomenally violent prophet book, but has this moment of sort of, I mean, it's all poetry, but has this moment that provides meaning and maybe some kind of optimism for the ability of Israel to go on, prevail against our enemies. Are there any questions only right now on this last excerpt? Susan, sorry, Merle, I just clicked ask to unmute. I didn't mean to. That's on me.
Yeah. This last excerpt, because I can't remember all the ones before without seeing them. He's specifying that it was a Levite. I thought that in the text that we read, it was an Israelite. That they said it was non-specific about which tribe they belonged to. So now it is specific. And Kohath led an uprising later. It was anyway. He's making it.
You're thinking of Korach.
Korach, you're absolutely.
That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in trouble even when I said it. Rebuked him with the sword of his lips. So that's a kind of poetic phrase to say, saying bad words, I guess, but then he slew him. I'm not sure about the sand business. The sand signifying Israel. What is that all about?
So they're connecting that verse saying, and he hid him in the sand, and the imagination here, again, like they have the whole corpus in their head. So they're thinking, well, wait a minute, there's this verse in Hosea chapter 1 that says that the number of children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea.
Right.
So Israel's referred to here as sand. So it must mean back there that this also means Israel. So maybe Moses in the story literally buried the guy in the sand, or maybe it's a metaphor saying that this man was buried, or perhaps even that there was a mob of Israelites who joined, although I imagine that would be different. We would get a whole different story if that were the case. But this is sort of saying that so we can understand that if it says sand for Israel here, then anywhere else that we see sand, we might plug in Israel and derive meaning from that. Rebecca, I see your hand up.
It's curious that to me that Moses rebuked him with the sword of his lips, where we know that Moses was heavy of speech.
Yes, that's right.
Right. Well, I think here we have this really, if we do desire a lesson, we like a good moral kind of thing. We might learn here that there is, that, what do we teach children? Like violence is not the answer, right? That even though here, of course, we do see that this ends with, the word is, makeh, like it's striking, like there is a physical violence here, but we see here Moses began with words. We always have to start with words. We have to try to reason with people. We have to try to point out the bad. We have to really expose truth to power, if we will. That the sword of the lips is the primary weapon, and then we might move forward after that if we have to only. That's something you could say. I'm not going to say that's what they're trying to teach us because I don't know, but you could totally think that from here. Okay, I want to move forward to another moment. We are going to engage with the number 5. If you are familiar with the Haggadah, if you sang all the songs, right, we have this amazing song, who knows 1, who knows 2, who knows 3, who knows 4, who knows 5. On Pesach, traditionally 5 is the books of the Torah, Chamisha Chumshei Torah. So that's really a non sequitur, but it's a way that we get into thinking about the number 5. Here we have 2 different moments where 5 comes up. They don't say it's the 5 books of Moses, but it's interesting, and I'm honestly not 100% clear on why 5 is the number of focus here. So let's get into it. Is there a volunteer to read what Rabbi Ishmael said about the 5 fingers of the right hand of the Holy One? Tamina, go ahead. Oh, you're still muted. Sorry.
Okay. Rabbi Rabbi Ishmael said, the 5 fingers of the right hand of the Holy One, blessed be he, all of them appertain to the mystery of the redemption. He showed the little finger of the hand to Noah, pointing out how to make the ark, as it is said, and this is how thou shalt make it. With the second finger, which is the next to the little one, he smote the firstborn of the Egyptians. As it is said, the magician said unto Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. With how many plagues were they smitten with the finger? With 10 plagues. With the third finger, which is the third starting from the little finger, he wrote the tables of the law, as it is said, and he gave unto Moses when he had made an end of communing with him. Tables of stone written with the finger of God, with the fourth finger, which is next to the thumb, the Holy One, blessed be he, showed to Moses what the children of Israel should give for the redemption of their souls. As it is said, this they shall give, half a shekel for an offering to the Lord, which then with the thumb and all the hand, the Holy One, blessed be he, will smite in the future of the children of Esau, for they are his foes, and likewise will he smite the children of Ishmael, for they are his enemies. As it is said, let thy hand be lifted up above thine adversaries, and let all thine enemies be cut off. Okay.
Thank you. So this is a moment where it's, to me, I will be honest, it's not clear the sequitur here into the thought process, but they are dealing now with the metaphor of the hand of God, which comes up in the Exodus story, of course, and the finger of God comes up in Exodus 8:9. Throughout the Torah, we are presented with this idea, and so it seems that Rabbi Ishmael here is thinking, how do we, parse out that hand of God? What does it do? And so I think this is just an interesting piece. If you play guitar, this is not how we number fingers. But for the rabbis, this is, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and each has its own role. This is something that is really curious, especially if we think about this text perhaps being composed in the Gaonic period. The Gaonic period is also sort of when the anthropomorphization of God, the attribution of human characters to God, it happens, but it becomes stated by certain of the early Gaonim and the philosophers like Saadia Gaon that although we might give God human attributes when we discuss God, God does not have human form. In reality, God does not take a recognizable, understandable form. And so there is this interesting sort of, if these texts are all contemporary to each other, there is an interesting piece here where we are both very well aware that God is not something that you could look at or touch like another person, and yet we want to understand God in human terms all the time. Go ahead, Penina.
I think a little bit also we're missing here that if they were living in the diaspora or when Israel was under either the Romans, the Greeks, or whoever it is that constantly passed by there and took over, that we'd call it Arba Leshonot Shel Geula, the 4 main words of redemption. And here he's trying to bring them back and shows, but the whole idea is velakachti, ve'eveti, ve'ga'alti. It's like right. Always the promise of coming to the land of Israel, to be there as legitimate citizens, as a legitimate ownership. So that's actually, but they all attribute it to God. Yes,
this is a perfect segue.
He's going to bring us. Yes.
Yes, this is a perfect segue to the next excerpt as well, because now they're done talking about God's hand and the 5 fingers, but they're now not the Arba Leshonot, but now the Chamisha Otiot. They're thinking about the 5 letters of Torah, which all appertain to redemption. So you're totally on the right track, right? They're thinking about redemption, about how it all goes back to God and how God will operate and make this all happen for us. And
that belief actually contribute to the whole idea that we survived, we continue, because we had these things, always knowing that we are promised and we are being helped and we are being guided into that place. Otherwise, we would never make it. We had to
good
have
explanation, yes. And it's good explanation for the people that were around, right? Also,
Exactly.
and they're wondering, okay, you have one God, right? What does God do? How do you explain all these things? Well, look, our God can do powerful things just with each finger of the hand. We don't need a God for this and a God for that and a God for that. We have one God who has all the power of all your many gods.
Very important.
So do we have another who will read these 5 letters of Geula? This is a bit longer of a one. I also am happy to do it. I'll do it. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer said, the 5 letters of the Torah, which alone of all of the letters in the Torah are of a double shape, all appertain to the mystery of the redemption. So now they're thinking not only of what are the letters, but the shape of the letters. They call it a double shape, which I think indicates that it takes a final form as well. So with Chaf, our father Abraham was redeemed from Ur of the Chaldeans, as it is said, Lech Lecha. So they're using that Chaf at the end of Lech and Lecha to connect it to the letters. And that quote means, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred unto the land that I will shew thee. With Mem, our father Isaac was redeemed from the land of the Philistines. As it is said, go from us, for thou art much mightier. Memenu me'od than we. Mimenu me'od. So this is not only is it they're giving us double letters that are letters that show that appear in the word and separately and as a different final form that literally physically look different, but we're also seeing places where this letter is being used multiple times in the verse. So with Nun, our father Jacob was redeemed from the hand of Esav. As it is said, deliver me, I pray thee. Hatzileni na. With the Pei, Israel was redeemed from Egypt. I have surely visited you. Pakod pakadati. I have remembered you or thought of you and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you out of the affliction of Egypt. And with Tzadi, the Holy One, blessed be he in the future, will redeem Israel from the oppression of the kingdoms, and God will say to them, I have caused a branch to spring forth from you, as it is said, behold, the man whose name is Tzemach, he shall grow up Yitzmach, Tzemach Yitzmach, out of his place, and this person shall build the temple of the Lord. So this is, without going all the way through, there is now a story that tells us, it's interesting, is that we only have a few minutes left and I want us to jump forward one more time. But we have this moment where we get, okay, so we know these stories. Abraham got these 5 special letters, and then Abraham gave them to Isaac, and Isaac gave them to Jacob, and then Jacob gave them to Joseph, and so on. Eventually, it went all the way down, and this part is great. A certain man has come, and he has performed, so there's now a man of Israel who has all the letters. They've pen passed down. And so when Moses and Aaron came to the elders of Israel and performed the signs in their sight, the elders of Israel went to Sarah, the daughter of Asher, and they said to her, a certain man has come, and he has performed signs in our sight, thus and thus. She said to them, there is no reality in the signs. They said to her, he said, Pakod yifkod, God will surely visit you. She said to them, he is the man who will redeem Israel in the future from Egypt. For thus did I hear, I have surely visited you. Forthwith the people believed in their God and in God's messenger, that's Moses, as it is said, and the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel. So I actually misspoke. It was not a man, and maybe this is sort of how we'll end today, but over time, this secret, so to recap all the way back to the beginning of this section, we're trying to discuss how do we know things? How did the question they're reacting to actually is, how did the people know that they could trust Moses? And so they've explained to us that there are 5 letters, 5 Hebrew letters that take 2 forms that are important they're like powerful letters in the Jewish people's story. of liberating us, of freeing us from various points in our history. And there's a story of how this knowledge of these letters which hold the key to redemption, were passed down through the ages. And eventually, although typically we have this super masculine centric story, they actually are bestowed upon and held by Serach bat Asher, a daughter of Asher, Serach. And Serach, according to this midrash, is the one who allows Moses to do his job, essentially. Serach declares to the people, because they know she has the 5 letters. She says, this is the guy. This is the person who these letters are leading to. So we can trust Moses. And so that is also just an interesting piece. Again, I don't have an answer for why, but we have this clear example of a very powerful woman in our history, which is unique. And so when we are on, hello, dog. Sorry, when we are on our, when we're at our Pesach Seder and we're thinking about Miriam, some of us have Miriam's glass, which has water in it to think about, to represent her well. We might also think about Serach bat Asher, this woman who really unlocked everything for Moses and gave him the opportunity to lead the people. That's, again, there's not necessarily a full sum up message of this lesson of this Torah study, except to say that, anytime you're reading the text and you have questions, you're right. You should always wonder. The rabbis wondered thousands of years ago, and we continue to be creative and try and think, and know that really, the questions that you come up with also are often ones that have been asked, and they exist in the corpus of our rabbinic literature. And so, if I leave you with anything going out, it's sort of, I hope that you're hungry and curious to think about how our rabbis worked through all these challenging things. And I wish you really a wonderful rest of your Pesach, and that when you start eating leaven again, it is delicious, and that you really, feel that freedom and you feel the appreciation.
Yeah, all those rabbis really try to give everybody hope, which is amazing. Yeah. Totally. The way that they found ways to do it, this is very, the imagination was really working out there sometimes, but it's like the idea that they want to give people hope. And it's
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shabbat
Very,
shalom.
very interesting.
Good to see
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Happy
That
Passover.
Thank you for taking the time.
Of course, Chag Sameach.
Chag
Thank
Sameach,
you.
everybody.
Chag Sameach.
Well, I'll see you soon.
You too.